Hey, what's up guys, Adamx here, hope you're all doing well, and in today's video I'm gonna show you how to set up the new NVIDIA app for the best performance, highest FPS, and lowest input delay. So if you didn't already know, NVIDIA is officially retiring the NVIDIA Control Panel, and it's not getting new features anymore, or coming with fresh driver installs starting driver 610.47. And everything that was in the NVIDIA Control Panel is now moving over to the new NVIDIA app. So let's go ahead and set it up properly. But before we get into it, please make sure to subscribe to my channel if my videos help you out. So a quick recap on what actually happened. NVIDIA officially retired the NVIDIA Control Panel after 20 years of service. It's basically in maintenance mode now, meaning it doesn't get new features and it doesn't come bundled with new driver installs anymore. And everything that you used to do in the control panel is now in the NVIDIA app. But if you already have the NVIDIA Control Panel, it won't just disappear on you, as it only goes away if you do a clean driver install. And even then, you can still grab it from the Microsoft Store if you want it as a backup. But going forward, the NVIDIA app is the reliable program to optimize your settings through, and it also has multiple new features that I actually like. First of which is automatic tuning, which automatically runs tests on your GPU for a few minutes, and it gives you an overclock that NVIDIA themselves guarantee does not void your warranty and will not damage your GPU, as the algorithm runs within stable safe limits. And if you don't want to use this feature, you can still use the performance limit sliders below, which allow you to modify the allowed maximum power draw from your GPU, fan speed, and target GPU temperature, which is honestly just a nice feature to be delivered by NVIDIA without needing third-party apps such as MSI Afterburner. Also, quick heads up, the NVIDIA Control Panel is still obtainable through the Microsoft Store, so for users that want to skip on NVIDIA's telemetry components that get installed with the NVIDIA app, and you don't really use features from the NVIDIA app like Shadow Play, you can actually just grab the NVIDIA Control Panel from the Microsoft Store and not get the NVIDIA app at all. But I honestly don't recommend that, as some new settings have already started not showing in the NVIDIA Control Panel. Anyway, so once you're in the NVIDIA app, you will see here Graphics tab, which replaces the old Manage 3D Settings page. Click into it and select Global Settings. These settings apply to all your games. Now, the first few settings here are for DLSS override, so the model presets, frame generation, and super resolution. Just leave these on Use the 3D app settings, and if you're more advanced, you can force the newest DLSS model per game, but for a global setup, the default is fine. Now for smooth motion, set this to off. It's NVIDIA's driver level frame generation, and it adds a bit of latency, so for the best input delay, keep it off. Now for low latency mode, I recommend on or ultra. On sets your maximum pre-rendered frames to 1, so the CPU can't queue up extra frames ahead of the GPU, and ultra takes it a step further and basically sets it to 0. It uses just-in-time frame scheduling, meaning the frame is sent right as the GPU is ready for it, which shaves off the most input delay. Now you can experiment between the two to find what gives you the best input lag while keeping your FPS stable, as Ultra can cost you a couple frames and may cause some stuttering. One important note, this setting only works in DirectX 9 and DirectX 11 games, and it does nothing in DirectX 12 or Vulkan titles, and for those you need NVIDIA Reflex instead, which has to be built into the game itself. For NVIDIA Reflex, you've got 3 options: off, on, and on plus boost. I highly recommend for most people to use on. It caps your FPS just below your GPU's max and synchronizes the CPU to the GPU so frames don't pile up in the render queue. And this is what kills your input lag at the source. Now, on plus boost does the same thing, but also keeps your GPU clocks running high even when the GPU isn't fully loaded, which shaves off a tiny bit more latency. The catch is, it draws more power and runs hotter for a pretty small gain. If you're a competitive player chasing every millisecond though, turn it on. Otherwise, plain on is the sweet spot for most people. Now for CUDA GPUs, just make sure your GPU is selected here. This setting controls which graphics card handles CUDA tasks. Now this is important for GPU acceleration, which is used for things like rendering, video encoding, and AI workloads such as model training. If you've only got one NVIDIA GPU, it's already selected and there is nothing to change. But if you're on a laptop or a system with more than only one GPU, make sure your main dedicated card is ticked here and not your integrated graphics, so that all the heavy lifting goes to the right place. For image sharpening, I would recommend leaving this off unless you actually want sharpening, because what it does is apply a sharpening filter over your games at the driver level to make textures and edges look crisper. The thing is, a lot of games already have their own sharpening filter built in, so stacking the driver one on top can make everything look over-sharpened and grainy. It also adds a tiny bit of overhead and latency. So unless you've got a specific game that looks soft and you want to sharpen it, keep it off and let the game handle its own image quality. Now for the next two settings, max frame rate and monitor technology, they kinda go together, so let's quickly talk about G-Sync and FPS caps. Alright, so if you've got a G-Sync compatible monitor, you'll see the monitor technology setting here, and it will have an option saying G-Sync compatible. Now, G-Sync basically matches your monitor's refresh rate to your game's FPS, which is great for smoothness, especially in games where your FPS jumps around below your refresh rate. Because when your FPS is not constantly at your monitor's refresh rate, you start to get tearing, which looks like lines across your screen and can make your game feel very sluggish. G-Sync fixes this issue by matching your refresh rate to your game's FPS to fix that tearing. To use it, first enable G-Sync in your monitor's own settings by the switches on the physical monitor itself, and then in the app, set monitor technology to G-Sync compatible. And if you're using G-Sync, you want to cap your FPS below your refresh rate using the max frame rate setting. And it's usually recommended to set it 3 frames below your refresh rate. So for example, on a 240Hz monitor, you cap at 237. So that's what I'm going to do. Now if you're not going to use G-Sync, leave it off and instead cap your FPS in-game to your refresh rate or to a number that divides into it evenly or multiples up from it. And here's why I recommend this. So on a 240Hz monitor, if you cap at something random like 165, the tear line that happens when your screen has tearing rolls up every frame, and this makes it so that the place where you get tearing on the screen is changing every frame, which can make the tearing look even worse as your frame pacing is now all over the place. But if you cap at a clean ratio instead, the tearing locks into one spot and the pacing stays even. So for 240Hz, that means cap at something like 120, 80 or 60, or of course 240, or going the other way around for 80 if your PC can push it, but keep in mind that frame rates above your refresh rate can cause more tearing lines, and it works both ways. So on a 60Hz monitor you can cap at 60 or 120, and again keep in mind that frame rates above your refresh rate can cause more tearing lines. Now this doesn't get rid of tearing as only variable refresh rate or VSync does that, but it keeps the tear line stationary and makes tearing more tolerable. Now for OpenGL GDI compatibility, you want to make sure to set this to preferred performance. This setting only matters for older OpenGL games and applications because preferred compatibility makes the driver sync up with Windows' own GDI rendering, which can tank your FPS and add input lag. It's really only there for apps that mix OpenGL and GTI together, like some screen recorders or capture tools. Preferred performance skips all that and gives you the smoothest result. So unless you notice an OpenGL app or capture tool acting up, leave it on preferred performance. Now for power management mode, you want to set this to prefer maximum performance. This setting locks your GPU clocks high instead of letting them ramp up and down. The default lets the card down clock when it thinks it's idle, and that ramp up can cause little stutters or FPS dips right when you need the performance. Forcing max performance keeps it pinned and responsive. The only trade-off is slightly more power draw and heat at idle, which should be completely fine on a desktop, but it's something that laptop users might want to think about. Now for RTX Dynamic Vibrance, this is the new digital vibrance feature, and it boosts the colors and makes things easier to see. It does, however, use your GPU a little, so for pure performance, you should leave it off. For RTX HDR, make sure to set this to off, unless you have an HDR monitor and actually want to use it, as what this does is use AI to add fake HDR to games that don't natively support it. It can look great, but it costs performance a lot and it's pointless if your monitor isn't HDR. Now for shader cache, you want to set the size to unlimited. Shaders get compiled the first time you run a game, and they get stored so they don't have to recompile every time. After a driver reinstall, your shader cache gets reset, and that's what causes a lot of initial stutters, because the cache is still building back up. Setting this setting to unlimited means the driver keeps as many as it needs instead of dumping them. so you get less shader stutter over time. The only cost is a bit of disk space, which isn't a concern unless you are really short on storage. And another new feature here you can see is automatic shader compilation, which is a new feature NVIDIA recently added, and I highly recommend you set this to on and then low. This feature will automatically rebuild DirectX 12 shaders while your system is idle, reducing the frequency of game runtime compilation after driver updates, which is honestly a very nice feature from NVIDIA to add, because this can reduce the frequency of stutters after a driver reinstall. Now for vertical sync, you want to set this to off unless you're using G-Sync, then set it to on. It just acts as a safety net to stop tearing at the very top of your refresh range. Now for the VR variable rate super sampling, you can set this setting to off unless you're doing VR on a very strong system, because this sharpens details in the center of your vision where it matters and eases off at the edges, but it still costs performance, so only bother if you've got the headroom for VR. For Vulkan OpenGL present method, just leave it on auto. Now at the bottom, click Show Legacy Settings, and this is where you will find the rest of the older options. For anistrophic filtering, set it to off. For anti-aliasing FXAA, make sure to set it to off. For anti-aliasing transparency, also make sure to set it to off. And now for the background application max frame rate. Now, I personally like this feature very much because it caps your FPS when you tab out of your game to another app, so your GPU isn't pumping out hundreds of frames on your desktop for nothing. This is honestly a very good feature, especially for laptops, as it saves power and lowers temperatures. I personally set mine to 60, but you can set it to any low value that you like. For multi-frame sampled anti-aliasing or MFAA, make sure to set it to off. Now for physics, you can leave it on auto, it doesn't really matter because it's automatically going to choose your GPU anyway. The more important settings here are the texture filtering settings. For texture filtering anistrophic sample optimization, you want to make sure to set this to on. For negative LOD bias, you want to make sure to set this to allow for high performance. For texture filtering quality, you want to make sure this is high performance. And for texture filtering trilinear optimization, you want to set this to on. And that's the whole graphics tab done. Now you want to head to the System tab and go to Displays, where you will find the old Adjust Desktop Size and Position features. In here you want to make sure that if you enable G-Sync to also set it to full screen and windowed, and then make sure your resolution is correct and that your monitor refresh rate is set to the highest available option. Now I know this is common sense, but you would be surprised by how many people actually don't realize that they weren't using their monitor's refresh rate to the max of its capabilities, so just make sure that it's the highest available option. Now for scaling mode and scaling device, I recommend you set these to no scaling and display unless you need it another way for a specific reason. You can also adjust your colors down here if you want. And now a little quick self-promo. If you want to take your whole system further and optimize your NVIDIA GPU even more by tweaking the hidden registry settings that aren't shown in NVIDIA App or the NVIDIA Control Panel, I recently released a huge new update for the Adamx tweaking utility with a completely new graphical interface, and it has many new features, one of which is a new interface that allows you to reinstall your NVIDIA GPU driver without any of the telemetry NVIDIA delivers with it. And don't worry, there's also a free version of the utility you can grab over at my new website, adamx.gg. I made sure that even the free version has essential tweaks that any PC user may need, and if you ever want to upgrade to get the more advanced features such as hidden GPU tweaks, advanced network and power tweaks, or even BIOS tweaks, you can always upgrade to the Pro or Elite tiers, and don't forget there is currently a 30% discount on all plans to celebrate the new update. Also make sure to join the Adamx Discord server to always stay up to date with the latest tech news and new ways to improve your Windows system performance. So that was it for the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it and that it helped you all out. I promise to be more consistent with video uploads starting with this video, and I truly appreciate every single one of you that still came back to my channel every now and then to check if I posted a video. So thank you all for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next one.